Welcome to Variations 4, Lytes and pH unit, covering questions number 11, 13, and 14. In case you're wondering what happened to question number 12, that was the dynamics of fluid shifts question. We actually covered that in the last video. So question number 11, explain the concept of hydrostatic pressure. Just by the way, osmosis and oncotic pull was also talked about in the last video. So the concept of hydrostatic pressure. On map 3, we have a definition from our Lewis textbook. Hydrostatic pressure is fluid pressure against a vessel or organ wall. So I'm going to use a diagram here that I made to explain two angles on hydrostatic pressure. So if we look at this diagram here that I made, we're going to have to imagine that this area here is a blood vessel. And that obviously what is within the blood vessel is whole blood. Hypothetically speaking, this diagram obviously is not a great one. It's only a conceptual diagram to make a point, but we know that blood vessels are surrounded by organs and vice versa. Vessels surround organs and organs kind of surround vessels in a way. What I mean by that is they all are kind of crammed in tight into this thing called the body. There's not a lot of breathing room between them. You've got vessels jammed up against organs and organs jammed up against vessels and vessels that perfuse organs and run through organs and all. You understand what I'm saying. It's all kind of together in one big mess called the body. The point here from a hydrostatic pressure point of view is that they put pressure on each other. Okay, I'm going to say that. I'm going to stop there for a second. I'm just going to go into the first way of looking at hydrostatic pressure. One way of looking at hydrostatic pressure is from the inside of the blood vessel. One action is this. Imagine this is the blood vessel, and now you put that patient into volume overload. Maybe you gave them an IV that was running too fast, or you gave them a bolus that was too much, or they've got a weak heart, or they've got failed kidneys, or all of the above. Whatever reason, there is now, imagine, increased blood volume greater than what is naturally supposed to be there. Well, with that increased blood volume comes increased blood pressure, and I mean pressure against the walls of the blood vessel. There's increased pressure against the walls of the blood pressure, of the blood vessel. The blood vessel has some degree of permeability in it. That's just the way it's made. And if you increase the blood pressure or the pressure of fluid against the walls of the vessel, that fluid can be pushed through and you can start to lose the serum or water portion of the blood can get lost to some extent from the blood vessel. It will leave the blood vessel and go into, in this case, tissues. So this is one of the reasons why when we have someone with, say, congestive heart failure, someone who you would expect to have, well, the word congestion says it all, increased pressure, a congestion of fluid in the blood vessels, that causes an increase in hydrostatic pressure, an increase on the pushing against the walls of the vessel. And this causes the water portion, the serum portion, some of it, to leak through into surrounding interstitium. This is why someone who has CHF will often find, for example, crackles in the lungs. They'll have pulmonary edema to some extent. This is why we'll find, what else? You tell me, what else might we find besides pulmonary edema? in someone with CHF. We may find swelling to the lower extremities. Now, part of that could be the whole veins that have lost their tone, sure, but a large part of it in CHF will also be that hydrostatic pressure pushing fluid through. And in fact, in the area where veins are weak, like the lower extremities, allows increased pooling of blood. Well, that just increases hydrostatic pressure, pushing fluid into tissues. So there's one very common explanation of hydrostatic pressure. There is another way that we have to look at hydrostatic pressure. We are often told that when we are draining a body cavity, what are the body cavities that we often drain in medicine? Can you think of three? Starting at the top, there's the pleura. We'll talk about this in a later unit, but if they've got a lot of fluid on board in the pleura cavity, we have to put in the chest tube to drain that. So there's one cavity where we may find ourselves draining a lot of fluid from. The peritoneum, such as in liver failure with ascites, again, a later unit, we may have to drain that. And they may come back with the drain in situ. And the one you're already very much used to is draining of the bladder. So we are often told, anyways, getting back to point here, we are often told, don't drain a bodily cavity too quickly, because if you do, you might have a drop in blood pressure. Can you use the concept of hydrostatic pressure to explain why draining a body cavity too quickly could cause a drop in blood pressure? Let's imagine this is the pleural lining of the lungs. Let's just say that's what this is. And it's filled with fluid that's not supposed to be there, and it's been there for probably maybe a day or two. Well, what's happened is there's blood vessels running all around and through this area, and they all have the pressure of those organ walls pressing up against their own walls. And they all have their own blood pressures within here too. If we were to drain this area super quickly, and for all practical terms, maybe I'm talking about 3,000 cc's in an hour, which, believe me, has happened with some pleura. It's hard to believe, but it happens. Let's say we drain this way too quickly. What happens to the pressure pushing up against the vessel wall? It suddenly decreases very quickly. That release in tension against this vessel wall allows this blood to be, the water from this vessel to be pushed through into tissues. So a sudden shrinkage of this area by way of releasing fluid quickly can cause what used to be pressing up against here to come through here, because now there's that increased empty space, so to speak. And this is why they say don't drain an area too much. When I ask, because you could drop blood pressure. When I ask students the question, why is draining a cavity too quickly causing a drop in blood pressure, they say, many of them say, oh, because you're removing too much fluid from circulation. That's not true. The fluid that is in the pleural lining has already left circulation. The fluid that is in the peritoneum, distended abdomen, has already left circulation. And the fluid that is stored in the bladder, already left circulation. So again, what's dropping the blood pressure is the sudden shrinkage of this area by way of draining the fluid. What used to be held in and held up against now flows through this permeable area of the vessel. skipping to question 13 now. And I believe 13 and 14 are very similar. I think we'll leave this video there for now, and we'll do another video discussing numbers 13 and 14. Thank you.